Hey everybody, I'm Logan Alec. I'm a CPA. I own Choice Tax Relief, where we help folks who owe the IRS or their state at least $10,000 in back taxes or who have multiple years of unfiled tax returns. Today, I'm going to be going over an IRS notice. IRS notice LT39. That's LT39. In this video, I'm going to tell you what this notice is. I'm going to tell you why the IRS sends it. Then I'm going to go through this notice part by part right here on my screen so you know what you're dealing with if you received one of these notices. And then finally, I'm going to tell you what you should do if you've received LT notice LT39. So without further ado, let's get into it. What is notice LT39? The LT39 notice is a reminder notice from the IRS to taxpayers who owe at least $10,000 to the IRS that they need to pay their taxes. Now, you may be thinking, well, I already get annual reminder notices, typically the CP71 series. Why are they sending me an additional reminder notice, right? Like in the middle of the year. Usually those CP71s go out closer to the end of the year. You might get them kind of December, January time. But as you can see, this LT39 was sent out in the middle of August, right? It was just kind of a mid-year reminder. Why does IRS send me another reminder notice? They're required to, by law, send me an annual reminder. Why are they wasting paper sending another one? And I'll tell you why. They are typically sending out the LT39 when they're preparing to file a notice of federal tax lien against you. Yes, that is right. Now, this is not exactly evident in the notice itself, but if we look at the sections of the IRS Internal Revenue Manual that mention the LT39 notice, it's often in the context of sending out a notice of federal tax lien. So NFTL's notice of federal tax lien. The IRS is instructing its employees, hey, before filing a notice of federal tax lien, be sure a written warning to the taxpayer that the IRS may file a tax lien against you is evident on each module. That basically means year to be included on the lien. Examples of notices, there's these. Right, there's a dreaded LT11. I made a video recently about that notice at the upper right-hand corner of the screen. You can see that. I've also made videos on these notices as well. I really enjoy making these IRS notice videos to help you figure out, hey, do I really have to worry about this notice? Or, does this notice kind of have more bark than bite? Because it can be confusing. And then, of course, here's, the LT39. So it's one of those notices that does mention a potential consequence of not paying your taxes. It does mention a potential consequence of that being the IRS filing a notice of federal tax lien. And in the IRM, we kind of see this notice being sent out when the IRS is preparing to file a notice of federal tax lien against a taxpayer. All right, so that's what it is. That's why you got it, why the IRS sent it out. Before I talk about what you should do if you receive the notice LT39, let's just go through it part by part here. Now, obviously, there's kind of the identifying information here in the upper right, notice LT39, the notice date, et cetera, but kind of get into the meat of the notice here. And this is the way they're formatting a lot of these collections-oriented notices recently. This triangled exclamation point and then big bold letters, right? Basically, the IRS telling you what it wants you to do. Please act on your balance of, in this case, for this client of ours, $91,095.50 for your unpaid taxes. In most LT39s, you're seeing this is the taxpayer's total balance with the IRS calculated through a particular date in the future. Obviously, there's some urgency here. You may take some solace in this language is a little gentler than it is in other collections notices. Please act on your balance, right? The language is a little bit nicer and less demanding than some notices, which, it's this triangled exclamation point, pay this amount immediately, right? So it's a little less invasive in that sense, but still, you shouldn't be ignoring this notice. In this smaller print down here, they're telling you, hey, we're required to send you this notice. You don't need to contact us if you're already working with them, the IRS, to resolve your tax account. Below this line here, they're talking about what the IRS says you should do immediately. And no surprises here. The first three bullet points here have to do with paying your IRS debt. Because that's the one. They get a return on these mailings, folks. They know. They probably have it down to a science. For every LT39, for every 10,000 LT39s they send out, covering like X total balance due, they're going to get Y% recovered, right? People are going to make a payment, right? I'm guessing they have it down to a science. Maybe they don't, but they should if they don't. But they know they're going to get a return on these, right? For the cost, for the ink and the paper and the stamp and the envelope, right? They're going to get a return on these, right? So the whole point, what they want you to do is pay, right? You can full pay your balance by September, the state in the future. If you can't pay in full right now, you may be able to be approved for installment agreement. Of course, they want you to pay as much of your balance as you can now. They'd rather have cash now. Then they talk about if you can't pay due to financial hardship. I think they mentioned like CNC and offers and compromise on the next page. I'll talk about that when we get there. The bottom here in this box, they give you the official IRS webpage for this notice, irs.gov/LT39. These notice web pages, they're not particularly helpful. It's kind of just the same information you're going to see on the notice itself, but you can obviously visit that if you'd like. Then you're going to have your billing summary here. This is basically just going to be a breakdown of all the tax periods, and right, if these are 1040s for an individual, all the years that somebody owes for. Just as kind of a quick kind of legend here of what these columns mean. Tax period ending. This is going to be the last day of the tax period. So in this case, the last day of the period was December 31st, 2020. Obviously, that's covering the calendar year 2020 for this person's 2020 1040 tax return. In this case, 1040 SR, because they might be a little bit older. And then here's the amount you owed on the return. Here's the interest that's accrued, and here's the penalty, the failure to pay penalty that's been accrued as well. For your total, this total here is the sum of the tax plus the interest plus the penalties. You sum all this up here, like in this case, these three numbers. What are you going to get? You're going to get this number here. Okay? It's kind of interesting. They don't sum it up. They don't put that a sum right here or something. I would do that if I were them to make it a little, easier for the recipients. And these figures here, they're calculated through a date in the future, right? So this notice date is August 12th, right? And then they have this, this date here, in this case, 21 days in the future, is the date through which these penalties and interest are calculated. All right, now we talk about the section that was promised on the first page. If you can't pay due to financial hardship, what should you do? So they kind of give you a couple options here. They don't explicitly say it, but this first one here, which they're calling temporarily delayed collection, this is basically currently not collectible, i.e. CNC status. And why do they call this a temporary delay?
Do you owe the IRS?
That's because CNC
or maybe you're
status
behind
is
on filing your taxes. Are you scared of what could happen to you and your family now that Joe Biden has given the IRS more capacity?
A temporary respite, so to speak, from having to pay taxes because you've showed the IRS that you can't afford to pay right now. But their assumption is you may be able to pay in the future. Okay, so that's CNC. I've covered CNC on many, many videos here on the channel. Here's a link to one at the top of the screen if you want to watch. Then they talk about a settlement. Settle your tax debt. That's an offer in compromise. Okay, so an offer in compromise, it could allow you to settle your tax debt for less than the full amount you owe, as is stated here. Again, I'm not going to get into the offer in compromise here. I've created numerous videos in the offer in compromise program here on the channel. Link at the top of the screen if you'd like to watch one of those videos. Okay, let's talk about consequences here. Consequences if you don't pay. Now, obviously, there are more consequences than this, when it comes to not paying your taxes. But let's just go over the three that they have specifically mentioned here. The first one is the filing of a notice of federal tax lien. And I obviously mentioned this at the beginning of the video. But what is notice of federal tax lien for those of you who may be unsure? Notice of federal tax lien is simply a document filed by the IRS in typically your county recorder's office, basically putting the world on notice that you owe the IRS money. And there's going to be an amount on there for certain tax years. And it's going to say, hey, John Smith owes us this amount of money. And what that's doing is basically letting creditors and potential creditors know the IRS has a claim against your property, right? So, let's say that you're looking to buy a house, and this is all property that you own now and that you will own in the future until the lien amount is satisfied. So, if you're looking to buy a house, a lender who's looking to give you a mortgage may not appreciate the fact that the IRS has a superior claim on your property than they would, right? They might not like that. So, you're kind of a lending risk at that point if you're borrowing in a secured fashion anyway. All right, we may seize or levy your property or rights of property if you fail to comply. What's a levy? A levy is when the IRS actually starts taking your stuff, and they give a partial list of stuff they can take here. Property includes wages and other income, bank accounts, business assets, personal assets, including your car and home, Social Security benefits, Alaska permanent fund dividends, or state tax refunds. Yes, they can take your stuff to satisfy your tax debt. Also, the U.S. Department of State may revoke your passport or decline to issue or renew a passport if you have seriously delinquent tax debt. I made a video about, passports and tax debt. Link to that video at the top of the screen. I've also made videos about these two things as well. In these notice videos, I don't go in depth on all these concepts because I have gone in depth on them in other videos. So feel free to check out my library of content on my YouTube channel. Or just type my name into YouTube, Logan Alec, tax lien, Logan Alec, passport, right? And, it should come up because I have hundreds of videos, right? It might be hard to find in my library itself, so sometimes you can use search. All right, then they give you some somewhat useless help information here. A phone number that you're going to have to wait on hold for a very long time for, only to probably get hung up on. Where you can find IRS tax forms or publications at irs.gov/forms. I find Google way easier to find IRS forms for, but if you want to use the official government website, so navigation, you are free to do that. Mailing address as well. Here they let you know that for jointly filed returns, the IRS is required to send a copy of this notice to both you and your spouse, right? So, let's say this individual, I don't remember if this person was married filing jointly for these years or not, but what that's saying is, your spouse will get a notice for this amount as well. Okay, that doesn't mean you each owe that amount. It doesn't mean you owe $182,000, right? It means you both owe $91,000. Okay, that's what they're trying to say there. If for jointly filed returns, obviously. Then they kind of give some information about taxpayer rights and assistance, and the taxpayer bill of rights and taxpayer advocate and low income taxpayer clinics, and how you might find some newbie lawyer accountant who's willing to do some work for free for you, or if you're, super duper broke or something. You can read this stuff. I'm not really gonna get into it because it's somewhat useless. All right, and then here's the payment coupon, right? If you want to pay by mail, you would mail your check or money order to United States Treasury, whatever, it could be the full amount or partial amount. You're gonna mail it here, and I do. Okay, that is the IRS notice LT39. Walk through part by part. Now what I want to do is talk about what you should do if you've received the IRS notice LT39. Well, the first thing you should do is check the notice for accuracy, folks. IRS makes mistakes. You see a number on there, and I'll tell you where. Especially on this billing summary here, folks. Make sure that these numbers are right, and that the IRS isn't trying to, screw you over, pull a fast one. All right, so go through the notice, correct any errors with the IRS. There should be a couple phone numbers in the notice you could call to address that. Next thing I would say is, for assuming you have a balance left on which penalties have been assessed, try to go get some penalty abatement, right? If you have a particularly, interesting / sad story that could possibly pull at the heartstrings of an IRS employee reviewing your penalty abatement request, do it. Go for it. Can't hurt. You might also qualify for a first-time abatement as well. I made a video about IRS first-time abatement here at the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Then the next thing you got to do, once you've corrected your errors with the IRS and knocked out any penalties so that your balance is now as low as it's going to get, right? At least for now. Next thing you got to do is, hey, you either got to pay that amount off or you got to strike some kind of a deal with the government, enter in some kind of a resolution with the government on your tax debt. Now that could take many different forms, right? It could be a hardship-based resolution, like we've talked about previously, currently non-collectible, right? Offering compromise. It could be some kind of installment agreement, some kind of modified installment agreement, maybe even a hardship-based partial payment installment agreement, right? That will result in you paying very little amount over time until the debt drops off, right? So there's all these potential options available to you, and you got to figure out, or you got to pay somebody to figure out and then negotiate it for you, what the best resolution option is for your remaining tax debt. If you're kind of confused about how tax relief works, I encourage you to watch this video up here at the upper left-hand corner of the screen. And if you owe at least $10,000 in back tax debt, or you have multiple years of unfiled tax returns, give us a call at Choice Tax Relief, 866-8000-TAX, or go to choicetaxrelief.com, fill out the form on the homepage, and we will reach out to you. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.